My name is Alex Adolph,
And I'm Brandon Cobb.
and this is the Land Development Accelerator.
Well, today we've got a guest on the call. So, you guys made a list of the type of people y'all wanted to see on here, and Stanley is who we brought in today. So, he is a VP of land acquisitions for National Home Builder. I'll get into his background and let him introduce himself, but he's worked with Ryan Homes, he's worked with Pulte. He's worked multiple different positions in National Home Builders, and now he's head of VP of Land Acquisitions with Dream Finders. We're actually doing a deal with them right now. So I couldn't think of anybody more perfect to bring on today. So give him a warm welcome. Stanley, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So for those listening right now that don't know who you are, give us a little bit about what's your background and what's your role today. And we'll start with that. I want to definitely jump into like the day-to-day of what you do for sure, but we'll leave that to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks everybody for your time. I know it's valuable. I started in real estate as really a young kid. My family owns a company in Southwest Florida called CRE Consultants. And so I always kind of joke that I grew up in the back of a Chevy S10 digging post hole signs for my dad's company before he had any money. And that's really where I learned about cap rates and IRR and return on investment, all these different things that, we throw around. And so that was a privilege. I got out of school, out of business school, and I went and started building homes for Pulte Homes and doing warranty work for them. And then I started selling for them. And then I ran sales teams for about 6 years, and then transitioned into the land side. And I've been there ever since, and just really enjoying the land acquisition side. But my entire career has been spent in home building. So hopefully I can share some knowledge of the insides of that.
Yeah, you're well-rounded. Like you really started from like the bottom and worked your way up, and now you're VP of Land Acquisitions with Dreamfinder. So what does the day and day look like for you in that position?
Yeah, so I've got the privilege of leading a small team that is focused on acquiring land throughout all of Middle Tennessee and converting that land into communities. And that varies, right? That can be raw pieces of dirt, that can be finished lot deals. And so, that role is one in which, I think there's a lot of freedom in it, and there's a lot of freedom in what we all do. And so I think anybody that I know who's successful in this is shockingly disciplined to the fundamentals, and that's what I preach all the time to my team. And one of those fundamentals that, like for example, before I got on this call, I had 11 handwritten letters to off-market deals that I identified, and in those letters, every single week, I'm going to do a minimum of 10 letters a week. And it seems somewhat foolish or maybe even a time waste, but many of the best deals I've ever gotten in my career came from those types of things. So I start my morning the same way every morning. I come in, I get to the office about 7:30. I create my action list is what I call it. I've got this, I'm old school, this pen pad, and I write down my action list for the day. And then what I do is I do my prospecting first when I'm fresh, so I don't have the time to overthink it. And so I'm going to do a minimum of 30 minutes of prospecting a day. And then from there, I go into our deals in backlog and our deals that we're currently getting through. And a lot of times, where I'm at in my role, I do a lot of calls with attorneys and going through contracts and things like that, which is a blessing. So overall, those are my main points. Then I spend time coaching my team and getting them better. And, it's kind of a day-to-day, I would say.
How is your land department structure? Like who else is involved in like the site selection, the due diligence, and the acquisitions?
So I have an analyst that does a lot of my underwriting. So he's going to sit there and go through the comps. He's going to go through pace. He's going to look at what the competitors in the area are doing, what kind of special financing they're using. We're going to look at, everything from what did they list the property at to what did it actually close at, to get a really good idea of each submarket that we're going to operate in. And then I've got a full-time land manager as well. And her job is to go out and prospect, find new deals, and drive business. And so the nice thing with what I have is the ability with my team to really have a high level of deal flow, which is one of the mistakes I see a lot of times with people who are newer into land acquisition or development is we get kind of married to the deal rather than being not emotional about it. It's X's and O's. Does it work? Does it not work? If it does, then you fight for it tooth and nail. But if it doesn't, you just don't. I don't spend a tremendous amount of time if a deal doesn't work sitting on it trying to spin that a Rubik's cube. If there's some major deal points that I look at and some qualifying things that I look at, and if this thing hits those buckets, then I'm going to work really hard to figure that out. But if it's a stretch or something like that, I encourage, most people that are newer to the industry, just go fast. You can't underestimate speed in this.
Yeah, not spending too much time with the tire kicker deals. You're only focused on what you really want to go after. So that being said, what does your buy box look like?
Yeah, so I can share what mine is, and I can share also, it might be helpful for others as well to understand what other national home builders are looking for, right? There's a general down the middle that most home builders are looking for. So first and foremost, understanding what asset light means and how important that is to a home builder. So if you're on the call and you're not sure what that means, just basically, I'm not going to acquire the land. I'm going to work through a developer, or I'm going to assign the contract to somebody else who's going to close on the property, and I will buy back the finished lots from them. So one of the best things you can do as a developer is pull that lever, because as a national home builder, I'm publicly traded, which means every dollar I spend is accounted for, and our debt ratios are highly scrutinized. So companies like NVR, for example, if you look at their stock price, I think it's in the 6,000 range, but it used to be around 10,000 when I was there. A big reason for that is they have no debt on the books. So they don't close on property. Their developers close on the property. They pay their developers a fee, and then they buy back the dirt from them. And so one of the best things you can do as a developer is recognize how much power that gives you to say, hey, listen, I'm the one holding the note, which keeps this off of your books and lets you be asset light. So that's a model that every single national home builder is actively moving towards right now. So that would be one thing I would share. The other thing too is home builders are going to go through the same process to get a deal approved, whether it's a 10 lot deal or a 1,000 lot deal. And that doesn't make a lot of sense for people that are not in the home building space, but it's the same exact process for a small deal as it is for a big one. And so when you recognize that the people that you're selling your deals to on a national level, they get paid not on the contract amount. That's a kind of a misnomer, is they get paid on lots. So the way a national would work is I'm bonused on how many lots I acquire within these certain calendar years. And so when you recognize that, you'll realize that actually national home builders really are pretty great to work with from the standpoint that they're not going to really fight you on price if they don't have to. All they're trying to do is figure out, does this deal pencil internally so that I can get this approved? And so a very fair question to ask your national is, what requirements financially do you need to get a deal approved? And, some might be comfortable saying that, some might not. I have no problem with it, because in my world, I just want the deal to get approved so I can get my lots so that I can get paid, right? The same way that you're trying to get paid on your end. And so recognizing the size of the deal matters, so if you're like, Greg, I heard you talking about looking at like a 9 lot deal. For me, it'd be great to get a 9 lot deal, but here's the thing, I'm going to have to go through the same underwriting, 5 to 6 internal meetings, external meetings to get a 9 lot deal done as I'm going to for a 250 lot deal.
So what is like the minimum unit counts that you guys are currently focused on? Like you don't even want to touch it, and just for you internally, because I'm gonna nuance this a little bit with what we're going after. What typically are you hunting as a minimum unit count?
I don't want my team looking at anything less than 50 lots. 50 is really small for us. There's not a cap on how big. I've got a almost 2,000 lot subdivision I'm in the final round of getting. We can go as massive as you possibly can imagine, and smaller is actually worse. So 50
Yeah.
lots, I wouldn't look at. NVR or Ryan Homes, they're not going to look at anything less than 150 on a raw piece of dirt. The barrier of entry differs based on if it's a finished lot deal or not. So if you bring me a finished lot deal, 50 is probably the lowest I would go. On a raw piece of dirt, I wouldn't look at it unless I can get 150 on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, and what I've noticed is the reps tend to go after like the bigger deals, 100, 150 plus units. Obviously, develop lots, different story. I'm talking about entitlements. But if somebody brought you an entitled, ready to go deal, dirt approved, does that change the situation on whether or not you'd look at it?
Yeah, dramatically. Right. And part of that, a great question you can ask a VP of Land Act would be, how many lots do you need to satisfy your quota this year? That's a great question to ask. Or how many lots do you need for 2027 or 2028? There's nobody who asks that question to us. And if you ask that, it really gives you a lot of information, right? Because right now in 2026, I need 36 finished lots to achieve my quota. And finding finished lots in Nashville that are fully entitled, I can pull a permit tomorrow. That's a big reason why, like the deal Brandon, you and Alex and I are doing, that's why that works in our buy box. 74 lots in that location, not exactly what we're looking for, but it satisfies that need and it gets us that quota. And so, I think there's a little bit of trepidation I find a lot of times with developers or brokers when they're speaking with us, wanting to know, like, can I say that? Can I ask that? I would actually ask you to really spend the time uncovering what are the pain points for the Land Act person. Because if I can do that, then I can build my marketing package around that and really significantly impact whether or not I get a deal done.
Yeah, 100%. So let's say that it's people that are working they're entitlers, right? They don't have a big piggy bank to go and do the development and raise all the money. They want to get to that, but they just want to entitle. Let's say they brought you a deal and it's got the buy box, right? It's in an area you guys are focused on. It's going to help you meet your quota. They've already taken it to the city and said, hey, gotten a verbal. They've already got a concept plan kind of drawn up, and the city's verbaled it, and they're coming to you at this point going, hey, I'm looking for somebody, I'm looking for my builder partner, I'm looking for my exit partner. How would you work with them in that capacity to, get that deal done?
Yeah, so don't underestimate what you have there. You got some really valuable information at your disposal, and something that a builder would love to run with, right? Because you've really done a lot of the heavy lifting. So recognize that if you don't do that, I have to budget that. And so I can now eliminate that from my budget. And now I've got a little bit more margin maybe to work with you on. Maybe I can pay you a little bit more for those, lots than before. And so one of the things I would say is when you go to a builder, asking them what their footprint is. And so a really good exercise I would go through if I was in your shoes is I would find out who my top 3 to top 4 national home builders are in the submarket I'm operating. And I would just reach out to their land manager or their VP of Land Act and say, hey, I've got a site. I'd love to send it over to you. But before I do that, I'm going to get a density sketch done. What is your bread and butter product size, right? Or do you love a 20-foot by 48-foot townhome? Do you like rear loads? Do you like front loaded? Do you want on your single family detached, right? For me at Dream Finders, if I can get a 40-foot wide single family detached product, that is perfect. That's right down the middle for us. We've got a ton of products. We feel really comfortable selling there. So now you're not just bringing me a density sketch, because what I've gotten in the past is somebody's put a lot of work into this project. They bring me this density sketch and go, hey man, I got this property. It's verbal. We're ready to go. And I'm going, dude, nobody has a 17-foot townhome. Like I don't have that. Now I got to re-architect it. So you can ask, and then you get like a little, what I did is I would just keep like a little document, and I would just put in that document, Pulte likes a 40-foot wide single family detached. They love a 24-foot wide townhome. And that way
Yeah.
I have to do my density sketch based on that aggregate average of what they really want. And man, you turn that in, that's valuable. That's a really
Every
strong
week I get a
resource.
deal where someone sends it to me because they know that we do this development stuff, and I had one that was like an 11-foot wide townhome product, and you could tell it was their first deal. They just shoved as much density as humanly possible on it,
Right.
and then paid all the money to get it approved. And I'm like, I mean, unless some like build to rent or apartment person buys it from me, I don't know how you're going to sell it. Okay, so let's say that they've got this piece of dirt, this great piece of land. It's in your buy box. They're under contract. They've got the verbal from the city, and they're like, Stanley, I want to do this deal with you, but like I don't have $200,000 to design this thing, everything. It's going to be your design anyway. How can you help?
Yeah. So builders on average, I don't know of a single builder that wouldn't have a budget. We all have a budget in our forecast that we send up every single quarter that has money for deals for this exact reason. Even deals that don't work out, right? So, I'll spend $250,000 to take a deal through. If you're bringing me what you have and you're going, hey, I don't have the funds to pay for this, but I've got it entitled or I'm working through this process. Like, really, you can open up a really open line of communication and use some of the builder's funds. Now, I mean, they're not going to do that for free, right? And they're going to
Yeah.
want something signed in some form of a contract of some sort. But I've always seen that work out. And kind of a freebie, some builders are a little bit more sticky on this than others. But one thing that I would always at least try for in my contract with the builder is asking for them to give me all the due diligence, every document that they got, on a piece. If I'm bringing them something and they're working on it and they've got their engineers trying to draft something up, it's already lost money to them. So if they drop the deal, why wouldn't you try to get some documents from them that show like, hey, Meritage Homes had this, I had it under contract with them, they got this engineer, he did this Alta study or they did this study, and here I can give you more packet. Because really what you guys are in the business of doing is mitigating the risk of national home builders by giving them a insight on the property that you're bringing them and helping them feel comfortable, because that's really all it is to get a deal approved.
So what I'm hearing you say is that if somebody has something under contract and it's locked up and it's in your buy box, but they don't necessarily have the funds to take it through the full entitlement and get the approvals, they've done the legwork to get the verbals, that's something that you guys can help with and actually pay for those costs.
Yep, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. How do you guys mitigate and manage the entitlement risk?
So most of the big boys will have a land entitlements manager on staff. So like I have a full-time land entitlements manager on our team, and these are people that are paid to take deals through from when my team acquires the property, gets the contract signed, I will hand it to him, and he's going to run point on that, keeping it on schedule, making sure those things are done properly. But risk is an inherent part of this business. My dad always said you make money by doing two things: one, you solve big problems, or two, you take big risks. And when you realize in the development game you are taking a sizable amount of risk, one of the things that I always try to teach and try to be helpful with is telling our developers, build in a contingency in your budgets and in what you think it's going to cost you to get a deal done, right? I mean, this is, our company did 4.5 billion in revenue last year. They can handle a 10-15% contingency, right? And they're going to bitch and moan about it, but if I'm running a mom and pop shop and it's between me feeding my kid and Dreamfinders making another 1.5% margin on a deal, obviously Dreamfinders is going to have their hurdles and things that they're not going to move on. And that's right. They should do that for their shareholder. But at the same time, I would just be mindful of building in proper contingency. It always takes longer than you think it's going to, and it's always more expensive than you think it's going to be.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And then just not having to pay for everything up front, right? You're just paying just enough for the things you need to get to that preliminary plat approval, right? And after that, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
we've got this thing approved. Now we can go the full blown CDs and start spending some money on it. So how do you underwrite that? How do you underwrite your offers to people? Because one of the things that I know is it's impossible to know how much it costs to build a home without the architectural plans. And it's also impossible to know how much it's going to cost to develop a piece of land without those civil drawings. So, how do you underwrite in order to make offers on properties?
So you gotta keep in mind too. So the way we're designed is really in a way that helps us do that at a high level, right? So I have a VP of land development, and what I can look at is, okay, I've got 14 active selling communities, and on average, it costs me $65,000 to develop a single family detached lot in Gallatin, Tennessee, right? And we track all of that. So we have this a ton of data that we can look at and go, okay, this is how much it's going to cost me to underwrite on the development side. And then I'll know, right? And it goes back to my earlier point about finding out what kind of product does Dreamfinder want? Because I like the 40-foot wide single family detached because we build a ton of it. So my direct vertical cost on that, I have really dialed in. I should know exactly how much it's going to cost me to build the Finley floor plan on a slab lot, no matter where it's at. And I know my trades, and I've got 3 trades per, I've like 3 framers just for framing. I got 3 roofers just for roofing, 3 electricians. So every job gets rebidded out to these individuals. And so do we have exact architectural standards or exact LD budgets? No, but we have a ton of data that allows for us to go, I know how much it costs on average to develop a single family detached lot. I know how much it's going to cost me to build here. I can Google what the permitting fees and impact fees are going to be. I know what I'm going to have to pay my agents on commission, both inside and out. I know, all my like little fees and ancillary costs. And then we build in a line item like I just talked about. It's more expensive than you think it's going to be. So we put in a small percentage in there for, the homeowner that moves in and complains that they're looking at Bob and Sue's kitchen, or they hate their backyard, or you're just going to have somebody who's going to bitch about that. So you need to put a little line item in there for a tree buffer or a fence of some sort. And by the time you've built that out, is it perfect? No. But back to my very first point about you cannot underestimate the power of speed in this industry and how fast you need to be turning your deals. You have to build a model internally that allows for you to look at a deal, underwrite it quickly, and go, is it perfect? No, but am I in the ballpark? Yes. And then build that into my contingency pricing of saying, like, I'm gonna have to be a little tight on this one. And there's other deals where you've got some spread, and finding your balance there, right? Because not every deal is a slam dunk. Some deals are like, let's just get this thing closed and move on.
Yeah. How do you um what are some things you wish that people who are, entitling land or bringing y'all land, they don't want to do development portion. What are some things that you wish they had, that they knew, in your experience working with those types of people?
I'd say the first thing is just involve us earlier and involve us often. So there's a natural fear that my deal's going to get stolen, and you got to be mindful of that. Be intentional, build the relationships. Brandon and Alex, I know Alex, I see him at the gym. Brandon and I've been on multiple calls, but there's a trust level there to where I'm not worried that Brandon's going to go shop this deal behind my back. Like that's just but that's over time and building proper relationships. Involving a home builder earlier in the process, get them to sign whatever legal document you need to make you feel comfortable, and then just sit with them, sit in their office, go, hey, what can you pay for a finished lot here? And don't be afraid to ask that, because if they don't know that, you've got a bigger problem on your hand, right? Like anybody who's worth their weight at all in land ac or in development, you should be able to ask them point blank. Like if I'm in Tennessee, how much can you pay me for a finished lot in Mount Juliet? And they should know that dollar. And then you should be able to back your way into that and go, okay, well, that if I did that, so you're telling me, right? This is like sales 101. So you're telling me that if I can get you a finished lot for $165,000 a pad, in Mount Juliet, fully entitled, ready to go, you'd be ready to sign a contract. Yes. Right now I've got a deal. I've involved them early. They helped me build out the density sketch. And what's happening is while you're also getting good feedback, you're not having to go back to your engineer 3 times. You're not having to go back to your attorney 3 times. You know, one of the questions Brandon asked me really intelligently on Friday was, hey, what are like kind of the you can't no-goes on your contract? Right? Like, what are my absolute non-negotiables? Because every builder's somewhat different, right? There and so if he knows that, then he doesn't have we don't have to do this 3 rounds of revisions with my attorney charging me $130 for a freaking email to do something. We were like, yeah, I don't care.
$600 an hour is what I pay the attorneys to
Yeah.
review contracts, and I do it every single time now because I just got out of I've dealt with builders that just waste your time, and contracts are important, and I prefer working with the nationals just because they're well capitalized. You know, well, it's really nice being on the side of the table that Wall Street's cutting checks to is what I joke about. So what to walk us through what does your internal approval process look like? So you're under, so I bring you a deal, we're under contract. Like, let's do our Maple Crest community, for example. Like we're the attorney's going to go back and forth. We're going to ink a contract hopefully this week. What happens then?
Yeah. So first off, Brandon, let me just say to everybody, you should ask this question in every one of your interactions with a national home builder. Every single one of them. You have got to ask that question. It's so important. So our internal process is Brandon and Alex brought me a deal. It's fully entitled, ready to go. Here you go. So I went through step 1 was fully underwriting the deal, right? There's my analyst. So Ryan, my analyst, is going to go in. He's going to look at all the competition in the area. He's going to look at resales in the area. And he's going to be diving into the top 2 things. So if you can answer this question preemptively, you're going to shave yourself about a week of time. How much a builder can sell a house for in that location and how many are selling. It's always pace and price, because when I underwrite a deal, I have to be able to say, I believe I can sell 3 a month here, or I think I can sell 4 a month here. And I believe based on the comps on the resale side and the new home side, this is how much I can sell it for. That is the entire underwriting process. Now, there's a shit ton of documents and a bunch of Excel spreadsheets that make people feel important, but it basically falls into those 2 categories. So that's number 1. The second, once I've underwritten a deal, then I do this route a little bit differently. I like to negotiate up front on deposit, take schedule, lot price before I send an LOI. Many home builders, you need to be wary of this, will send you an LOI if they haven't negotiated it with you. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll send you an LOI with a dollar amount that they can't underwrite necessarily. They think they can, but they're not sure. But they just want to tie up the property so they have time to figure it out. That time kills deals, right? So for you guys specifically, be mindful of that, not allowing yourself to get tied up on wishful thinking. And it's like the old adage, like if it's too good to be true, that's exactly right.
Probably
like a home builder, they're not in the business of losing money, right? So if you're looking at a deal and you're going, okay, I think that you can sell a house for $450,000 here. Resales are selling at this, new homes are selling at this, and I think, and based on their closing volume, they're doing 3 a month out of this community. Well, every home builder does it. They're not going to want to be higher than that. So they're going to want to be lower than that and have a competitive advantage to go to the market, right? So once I've underwritten the deal, I've come to terms with the seller on the major deal points, I send an LOI. Once the LOI is signed, I send that LOI to my attorney. My attorney goes through it, generates a purchase and sale agreement. Most nationals are not going to use your PSA. Just from a regulation standpoint with Wall Street, it can be really, really challenging. It's not that it never happens. It's just highly unlikely. So don't be put off by that. But what you can do is you can send, like Brandon did this great. He sent me their PSA and was like, this language is important to us here, 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 and here. So I sent that to my attorney and said, hey, these are some of the language that's important to them. Are these agreeable? For the most part, everything was agreeable. Great. We are going to incorporate that. Then I send back a PSA. We just saved everybody time and money.
Mhm.
Once my attorney sends the PSA back, you typically go through some level of redlining of, whether this deal point, that deal point, whatever. And then once you go through that, then this is where the rubber meets the road. There's what's called a committee. Typically, these are asset committees, or the name of them, or green folders, what their like kind of abbreviation is sometimes. And what that is we take internally in the division, we create an entire slide deck. We put pro formas, CMAs, we put all the data on pace and price, everything that's projected, new jobs that are coming to the area, all that. And we put it onto a spreadsheet and onto a PowerPoint. It's about 65 slides. And then we will go, and as the VP, I present to the national committee, asset committee for the company. And so that'll be the president of the company, oftentimes the CEO or the CFO of the company, and the national VP of Land Ac. And I'll say, here's the hurdles that you require of us to bring a deal to you. These have all been satisfied. Here's the pace we believe. Here's the price we believe. Here's our assumptions. Back to your point earlier, Brandon, on like underwriting a deal. Here's our assumptions. Here's why we have those assumptions. Here's the sign off of everybody internally that's a vice president saying that, they believe this assumption is correct, putting their name on it. And then we have a division president to sign off as well. And at that point, the asset committee will go, okay, this is approved. And at that point, I can start the process of writing you a check and moving the deal forward. And so that's high level, but
Yeah, no, that's really good because a lot of people don't realize. And how long does that typically take from contract signing to?
if you don't do the upfront work, which a lot of home builders don't want to do, they want to just kind of get it tied up, it's at least 30 to 45 days. Now, I move quicker because I do the upfront work and I know what my hurdles are and I make sure those are satisfied before I bring a deal. But I would just be mindful too. This market's somewhat challenging right now on a sales side, and so the scrutiny is higher than it's been. And so knowing that, when you're bringing deals, just know that, hey, they're going to go through a higher level of scrutiny. So it might take a little bit longer than you're anticipating.
Yeah, two more, and then we'll open up for questions for everybody here in the community. What trends are you seeing that you feel are shaping the future of land acquisition? Like anything like smaller lot sizes, master plan, communities. I know I saw a switch. There was a lot of smaller homes being built when interest rates kind of went up to kind of combat the affordability. What are you seeing? What do you think the future looks like?
Well, one of the things I think it's really interesting is when I was in business school, I had this professor and he said, you can be Whole Foods or you can be Walmart, but whatever you do, don't try to be both. And that's exactly what's happening in home building. You have Del Webb, right, which is the 55 plus retirement community for Pulte homes. That branch of their business is so wildly profitable that it is offsetting the declining margins that they have in Centex communities, Pulte communities, and all their other brands. And it's so offsetting that they're able to go and report at their shareholders meeting and at their quarterlies that like a gross margin of like 27%, which nobody's even close to touching. But
Oh,
when you're underwriting a Del Webb, you're looking at like a $40 million amenity center. $35 million amenity center. So you've got to, if you're going to be Whole Foods, which is what Del Webb is, that's high end, it's nice finishes. You can go to a design studio. You have a full-time lifestyle director that makes like $100,000 a year and it just planning trips and bingos and parties. And you're going to crush it on your sales, but you've got to have the upfront capital to do it. So what I'm trying to say and how that'd be applicable to you is if you're going to go high end, be high end, like from all the way through my products, my lot sizes, my amenities, my entrance monuments. Spend the money. If you're going to go high end, you're going to sell nice. If you're going to be cheap or less expensive, then be super cost focused, right? Your engineering, make sure every road is double loaded. Make sure you got good cut and fill. Make sure you understand my density, right? And understanding, okay, what is selling, right? This is that preemptive CMA work that if you just take an hour before you pitch a product, you're going to come in so much more informed because one of the things I teach my team all the time is you need to write the narrative, right? And so it's kind of a silly example, but it drives it home. If my wife finds out that I'm texting a girl behind her back, right? she's gonna lose trust in me immediately, right? But if I'm texting a girl and I go to my wife before she finds out and say, hey, I made a mistake. I was texting my wife. I was texting this girl. I shouldn't have done it. I wanted you to know it stops now. I lost trust, but I didn't lose it entirely because I ran the narrative, right? And so it's the same thing in sales, the same thing when I do home building or land development. If your deal has a secret, something that's not good, if I find that out without you divulging that information, or you're kind of like trying to skim something by, when I find that out, trust is lost and it's over. But if you come to me and go, hey, I've got this problem, can we workshop this together? Can we figure out how to do this? It's fully entitled, or whatever the situation is, man, builders can do a lot more than you think they can, and will get down in the dirt with you. And when you think about, I'm going to do 500 sales this year, my ability to influence a city planner or somebody who holds some power on a local level typically is a little bit higher than somebody else, just from the standpoint of what we're able to get pushed through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes 100% sense. Yeah, I love hearing all this. So I'm excited because a lot of stuff that you're saying is what is in our land development blueprint already. I mean, it's almost word for word some of the stuff that you're saying. We talk about meeting the builder before getting the buy box, right? The footprint of the product, all
Yes.
that stuff. This is gold. If you could tell aspiring land entitlers or developers one thing that would help them win with a national builder, what would it be? Maybe it's a couple things.
I would say one of the main things is they want to meet you more than you think they do. You're not a pest. You're not a burden to them. Constant outreach of what do you need to achieve their quota, right? When I used to sell houses or teach people how to sell houses, I always said, I always start my sales process with understanding the pain point and understanding what they're actually trying to achieve. Right? Because if you're one of those people, there's a guy here locally who just sends listings and he like wants to get paid on it. He's like, oh, I
Yeah.
found this, and it's like, dude, I can go on the MLS, like I can see it too, right? And we've got teams of people that research property. If you can send value and spend the time building the trust, like give a crap about the human being that's behind the email, and saying, hey, what do you need? How are you doing? How's your wife? Get to know their wife's names or husband's names, get to know their kids' names. Like, these things, I know they seem somewhat trivial and you're moving quick, but if you do it, it makes your deals go so much faster. Because, Brandon and I, hell, Friday, I called you and I was like, hey man, we hit a snag in our deal, and I was like, we'll figure this out. It wasn't a matter of like, oh, the deal's blown up, it's over. But I was just like, I know we'll figure it out. And we did. And now the deal's going to progress. We'll get it signed. And so just don't underestimate reaching out, getting involved with these guys early and these women earlier and often, figuring out their buy box, like you said, and then designing, your engineering based on what you believe is going to be most down the middle. And the best way to do that is just do an hour worth of research within a 5-mile radius is what they're going to do. Every home builder is going to look at within 5 miles of the site. What are houses selling for and how fast are they going? If you know that data, man, you're like 90% more prepared than most people we talk to.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love everything you just said was gold on this call so far. I want to open